Hi, friends, and welcome. We're here with Deacon Nicholas Kotar. Good to see you, Deacon. How are you, sir?
Thanks, Dominic. I'm doing very well. Good to be here.
So, we're going to chat through a series of short conversations that Deacon has proposed on how to cultivate the artist's life. So, we're going to get right into this. The first one is called More Than a Great Idea. First of all, if you would run us through the overview of this, and then let's get into why we're starting with this topic that being an artist or being a creator or a writer is about more than just a great idea.
This is something I've been thinking about a lot over the past year or so. As personally, I've gone more and more into training other authors into thinking about into being forced by life circumstances into considering what are the important things in my life as an artist. What are the things that I need to focus on? Because the nature of doing business on the internet is that you can, if you want to, work 24 hours and constantly be doing something that there are actual analytics that tell you that what you're doing is useful. Whether that is actually useful, whether that is doing something that ultimately helps you create a work that will become uh, enduring in any meaningful sense, is an
Mhm.
entirely different conversation. And because it's been a moment in my personal life where some things have come together in chaotic ways. It's also an important sort of transitional moment in my writer business. In any case, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've noticed that much of the advice out there for writers, whether that's for writers of faith or not, is largely uh, hanging on the idea that what you need is just a good story
Mhm.
and churn it out, churn it out, churn it out, and choose whatever path you need,
Mhm.
whether that's through a big publisher or independently publishing it yourself, and then you should be fine. And if not, then that means the idea was no good because there was no market for it. So you chuck that idea and go on to something else. It's a very, it's a strange way of relating to the creative act. It's a lot
Mhm.
more similar to how people relate to machines and widgets than it is
Mhm.
to how people have always throughout human history related to the creative act, especially the act of writing. And it's not surprising, of course, because the way that the internet is structured, it is optimized, especially if we are taking advantage of it to make a living out of it. It's optimized for the kind of person who thinks in terms of widgets, who thinks in terms of things like minimal viable product and those kinds of things that are much less to do with meaningful connections between human beings and are a lot more connected with the idea of
Mhm.
getting as much content out as possible so that you have the largest possible number of touch points for people to have contact with you. And although there is some usefulness to that approach, if you do that all the time, and we're seeing this happen at large in the indie author community again, whether it's writers of faith or not, it doesn't matter. People are
Mhm.
hitting against coming up against a very uh, strong internal difficulty of burnout. And
Yep.
this is exacerbated by the reality of the very quick technological changes that we're going through right now. The fact that we haven't yet fully understood how to relate to this little machine over here that has such amazing capability to entertain and distract us
Yeah.
forever and
Mhm.
never stop because of political things, because of cultural things, because we are definitely, I think, in a stage of, if not cultural decline, then at least uh, a moment of cultural chaos or transition. And
Mhm.
because of that, everybody is rubbing up against the reality that just a good idea is simply not enough anymore. There are far too many good ideas out there. So, what then is the thing that we should be focusing on a lot more? Because the fact is that what we've lost touch of in this rush towards audience or rush towards attention,
Production. Yeah.
yeah, is that what we really want is for ourselves and for those who come into contact with us to be touch points for cultural growth and change. We want ourselves and we want others to come into contact with us to be transformed by the encounter of storytelling and story listening and story reading
Mhm.
so that we are then inspired by that experience to go back into our daily lives and enact actual meaningful change on the level of self first. because only a transformed person can then transform others around him. Not something that people talk about a lot. So, although a good idea, a good story, a good um, topic, a good genre, these are all things that you should worry about. I'm interested in putting that thing in a completely different place in the hierarchy of values,
Hmm.
if you would. And I'm much more interested in dealing with this problem that everybody has, the problem of attention, the problem of existential pain that is being palliated by a very comfortable and pleasing and distracting technology,
Hmm.
and how to instead cultivate the kind of life where we ourselves are drawn towards the act of creation so that others then can be drawn with us into the full experience of that creative act that can then perhaps become a work of art.
Hmm. You mentioned writers specifically, and of course, this is a writing community and all. So, could you unpack that a little bit? What is the distinct, perhaps, charism or thing that a writer must be aware of as opposed to all of the other creative arts?
Well, I think that what I'm talking about can, to a certain extent, be applied to other creative pursuits.
Hmm.
The reason that I've dedicated so much of my thought and so much of my time to specifically the art of writing as opposed to any other form of art is not simply because it's something that I enjoy or I'm good at. I do other things as well. And there could have been many other creative pursuits that I followed. But I think it's undeniable that and the science, as they say, is catching up to the ancient fact that we already knew because we are connected to ancient traditions,
Hmm.
that storytelling is meaning making, and it has always been. And
Hmm.
simply just to stop at the fact that Christ primarily told his most instructive, uh, his most instructive uh, teachings through the form of parables should
Hmm.
at least make us stop and think about why storytelling as an art is so important. As for the written word, it's simply undeniable that reading a written work and therefore writing it in the first place is something that can have incredibly profound changes to the psyche, to the body, to the mind, and to the heart of the human being who is engaged in the act. A lot
Hmm.
more of an effect than many other forms of art, simply because the difficult process of forcing the brain to concentrate long enough over a written work
Hmm.
is something that can have tremendous neurobiological benefits for a human being. I'm not a neurobiologist, but I don't think any neurobiologist will argue with me on this fact.
So, okay, so wrapping up our first point, it's more when you go to create stuff or being somebody who is creative, it's more than a good idea. Um, you're regrounding this conceptual, this fun thing, or this thing that you want to work on. You want to replace that within a new hierarchy of values, and we're going to get into that in a
Yep.
moment. Because otherwise, if I'm going to recap it correctly, you said we end up on this hamster wheel of meaningless creative output, which often leads to burnout. And all of that functions then to serve the machine, serve technology, as opposed to actually trying to serve human connection around the germ of this beautiful idea or this captivating thing that we want to share.
And the
Um,
connection is only possible when the transformation happens within you, the artist, first.
okay, so let's go into that in our next conversation. It's the twofold path. You've broken into two parts, so we're going to start with part one and then move on to part two after that. So we'll be back very soon, friends.